Hi, this is Lauren Varner. She's the Director of Compliance and Quality Assurance here at Interfaith Community Services. Thank you so much, Lauren, for
You're
sitting
welcome.
down with me and going over these questions.
Sure, no problem.
So we'll go ahead and start. Question 1, how would you describe your organization's business analytics resources for the company or the area of your responsibility?
Okay, so just to kind of give you a little background, so Interfaith Community Services, we are a fairly large nonprofit organization in North San Diego County. So we do, with that, have a lot of different services that we offer to all kinds of different populations. So whether it's homeless, low income, veterans, we serve an array of people. So with that comes a lot of different outcome tracking requirements, responsibilities that we have to fulfill. So right now, probably one of our largest, at least business analytics kind of solutions that we have is we do enter client level data into ServicePoint, which is a homeless management information system database. So at minimum, when a client comes through our doors, we are, tracking some basic demographic information, putting that into ServicePoint. And then from ServicePoint, we do have some canned reports that we can pull out. But I think we'll talk about this later in the interview too, some of the constraints that we have with that. But so through ServicePoint, they do have business objects reporting modules, so we can pull some reports that have some different key performance indicators, some outcomes that we're looking for. But it also kind of just varies on the program.
So if somebody is looking for like just their department, you're able to pull information from ServicePoint on just their performance measures?
Yes. So and it depends on how in-depth the data is that we're collecting based on that program. So we have all of our agency programs, which I believe we have about 44 in ServicePoint right now. So we have everything separated out by program. Now, depending on the program, we may collect a different level of data. So maybe we're only collecting some basic demographic information because maybe it's not required by a grant or contract, but we've decided that based on that population, that's probably the best data that we're going to get. So we can break it down by the program, by the department, however that's needed.
Got it. And can you tell me a little bit about your new baby, CVCRM?
Yes. So one of the things that we realized with ServicePoint is it is designed to be a homeless management information system. However, we have a lot of programs that are not dedicated for the homeless population.
Got it.
So we have some employment services programs, we have some basic needs programs where maybe it's just a single service transaction, providing a food voucher or food from our pantry, clothing, something like that. So what we kind of discovered is, we're trying to fit all of these programs into this homeless management information system model, but it's really not giving us what we would like to have as far as outcomes. So CVCRM is an open source data management system that we've essentially customized to actually enter in the data that we want in order to get the outcomes that we're looking for. We've started so far with our family self-sufficiency program, so a lot of those outcomes are employment-based. They may have to do with even just increasing someone's employment from part-time to full-time, things like that. So we're able to customize the questions we're asking to the client, putting them in the system, and then being able to pull those out. So that's something new that we're working on. I'm very excited about because we are going to have some better key performance indicators to see how we're doing in those programs.
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. And question number 2, what key outcomes are you chartered to deliver?
So I would say as an agency, some of the things that we really try to work on is looking at people leaving our programs and what the situation is when they're leaving our programs. So if it's a homeless dedicated program, when they're exiting, are they exiting to permanent housing? If it's one of our employment programs, do we place them in employment? If it's anything other than that, what makes sense as far as them leaving that program? What was the goal? So really, I would say probably our top 2 things that we look at is clients exiting to permanent housing and then did they either gain self-sufficiency or did they increase their level of self-sufficiency either by increasing their income, employment, things like that.
And can you tell me why we track those numbers?
Yeah, so I would say it kind of goes back to a majority of our programs are housing programs, whether they're transitional housing programs, permanent supportive housing. A lot of those come with some certain canned requirements as far as what the federal government expects us to achieve in providing these services. So if we have a grant through Housing and Urban Development, I think we have about 7 or 8 of those. A lot of those are focused on obviously exiting these clients into a permanent, stable living situation, since that is the goal from the beginning. So it really, it can depend on kind of the funding source, federal regulations, kind of the way that things go through different trends. I know with Housing and Urban Development, there was maybe 10 years ago a really big push for transitional housing. However, now we've kind of shifted to rapid rehousing and really getting clients into housing quicker, getting them into their own unit, supporting with rental assistance or a security deposit, and then kind of, you know, backing out of the situation once they're kind of stabilized. So that can also affect things too.
Right. So it's like in the program that I work, the grant per diem program, there's a contract in the grants, and the grant is telling me what my outcome really should be, and so I should be hitting those.
Right. Yes, that's definitely part of it.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Question number 3, as opposed to business plans, what are some of the key business pains you are currently facing?
Well, I'm sure that this, you know, is going to sound like a broken record, but obviously resources, that's a huge issue. Not only, you know, funding, but also staff resources. I know that in our organization, we're really trying to build up our infrastructure. So I was brought on board, and I was kind of like the only person brought on board to cover data as well as compliance. And so now we're realizing, you know, that that's something we really need to work on. So we have, you know, some more staffing support, funding support to either get those different, maybe it's a different, you know, analytic software or something where we can take our raw data and put it into a different form to manipulate it, or even just having support to help with really analyzing that data. So that's something that's kind of been something that we're working towards, and it's a goal. Something else that we've kind of struggled with is going back to using the homeless management information system. A third party agency, they run that system. So they are the lead agency for the homeless management information system.
That's Service Point.
Service Point, yep, for San Diego County. So they specifically have funding through Housing and Urban Development to operate that system for our county. So we don't really have the ability to create specific reports to, you know, create a business object report that, you know, pulls out some of those indicators that we might be looking at. So that's definitely been a constraint where, you know, we put the data in, but sometimes we can't always get it out maybe the way that we want it to.
And that's where CVCRM could come in to benefit us,
yes,
is we wouldn't have those constraints anymore.
Right. So it's really taking, you know, what does Interfaith want to see? Not so much even just what's required through a grant or contract, but what is our agency, what do our supporters, what do they want to see? And so part of that is, you know, we have a strategic plan that was created in 2015 to really make sure that, you know, Interfaith, what we're doing is mission driven, that our goals that we have really follow kind of what Interfaith was built to do.
Right.
And then with that, you know, what are the outcomes that we want to see based on what we've decided our strategic plan is going to be. So I think having a solution that's customizable, that we can then really decide, okay, this is what we want to see, this is what we want to present to our supporters in our lovely annual report. You know, having that is going to be really nice. So
Right. Okay.
very helpful. Mm-hmm.
And I think I kind of talked about the next question a little bit, but we can go into it. Is what business challenges are you now striving to resolve or improve?
Yeah, so definitely goes back to bringing in our own solution and trying to do it in a way that's not too costly. Because, you know, as a nonprofit organization, we have a lot of different funding sources, and usually they're dedicated for specific things. A lot of our grants may have funding for data collection analysis, but it's small usually. So we're trying to create this new system to really kind of beef up what we're doing as far as data collection. And then also, I think just shifting the culture of how we look at data here at ICS. I mean, really, Interfaith is a great place as far as it's still got that grassroots, like very volunteer driven. However, we're professionalizing, and we realize that we do have to make more data driven decisions, because that's the way that the pendulum is swinging now. It's like,
Right.
you know, it makes sense to do things based on what we're actually seeing coming through our doors.
Right. It's like we have to be with the curve or ahead of the curve instead of
Yes.
falling behind that.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. The next question, what are a few of the specific KPIs and measures that are currently most significant here at Interfaith?
This kind of, you know, goes back to the question about the outcomes that we're looking at, but really we're looking at the percentage of clients who exit our programs to permanent housing, the percentage of clients that increase their self-sufficiency, and then also income as well. So those are kind of those main specific things. Of course, at the end of the year, we always have some other metrics that we like to include in our annual report, but hopefully that will grow, you know, in the future.
Right.
Based on the changes that we're making. So those are kind of the basic ones right now, but I'd like to really improve those over the next,
Right.
you know, couple years.
So it sounds like, and we know that we both know the mission is helping people help themselves and
Mm-hmm.
building that self-sufficiency. So anything
Yes.
that we can track that's a positive track for
Absolutely.
helping a client get into self-sufficiency
Mm-hmm.
is the KPIs and the measures that we're constantly
Yeah.
trying to meet and exceed.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
Question 6, what improvements, for example, specific data in the KPIs are being targeted?
So I think one of the things we realized after looking at our last kind of round of annual data that we presented to the public was that we really want to work on our exits to permanent housing. So we do have a lot of housing and shelter programs, but I think across the board, that's something that we really want to improve. So I don't have a specific percentage per se, because it is really different across the board, and depending on the nature of the program, it's going to be a little bit different. So in our emergency shelters, we tend to unfortunately have a lower percentage of success, just because the population is a much more vulnerable population,
Right.
higher needs. Maybe they have more barriers that they're experiencing. So I think part of kind of what we've talked about as far as improving infrastructure is also really getting staff on the same level, as far as, you know, we do need to set some standards for ourselves and really work towards improving our outcomes percentages and things like that. So.
Got it. And what impact would KPI improvements have for the organization?
Well, definitely it would help with funding.
Right.
To create new programs, sustain current ones, improve the ones that we have. A lot of our private grants, they want to know, you know, these very specific outcomes based on the type of support that they're providing to the agency. So whenever we can say, you know, we've taken this money and we've put, you know, 95% or whatever percent of it towards clients, and then these are the outcomes that we've achieved, that's extremely powerful, and that puts us in a position to be able to gain new funding, sustain it, so we can keep serving our clients and hopefully, you know, continue to improve.
Because it is true, correct me if I'm wrong, that some of these grants come up on their terms and we're having to, you know,
Yes, and if they're competitive,
Right.
especially, and the funder, so if, you know, whether it's a federal or state or something grant, and the funder is looking at your performance outcomes for the past fiscal year, and they're lower than your counterpart over here, I mean, obviously we're not going to be as competitive if we're not showing that we've done the best that we can with this funding.
Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So question number 8, what internal or external constraints, if any, are placed on the organization's business processes?
I would say that, I mean, since the short time that I've been here, some of the issues I think is just in general, staff turnover and, trying to get to a spot where you've stabilized your staffing structure so that we know that we're, providing the best services that we can. But then also another issue that we face a lot of is just like data quality in general. And, whatever we put into our systems, that's what we get out. So if we're not putting quality data in there, we're not really getting that out of our system.
And is that just because there's so many users putting in data into the...
Yeah, that's part of it. And I think another part of it was... before, we were, again, trying to use a system for certain programs where it just didn't really match up. So we're putting in all this homeless information data about a program that is not homeless specific. And I think that kind of creates some confusion with staff. And it's like, why are we doing this? Are we really doing this for a purpose? So that in general has just kind of been a constraint. And again, going back to kind of changing our culture here and showing the importance of why we're collecting this data and why we're doing this, because to a lot of especially like a case manager who's wants to spend a lot of time meeting with their clients face to face, the paperwork and the data, that's kind of is an afterthought most of the time, because that's not what you're here to do
for them.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so I think it's just getting people into the mindset that obviously yes, your client comes first, but then how do we set you or put you in a position to be able to do this other stuff that is still very important for sustaining the work that we do.
Well, it sounds like getting the case managers to understand that by inputting the data that we have, the data that we've collected, will help us continue these grants year after year instead of these grants being competitive and going to another agency or user.
And sometimes it's just the education of why do we ask this question specifically?
Correct, yeah.
When I first started years ago doing data entry, I used to think, why are we asking questions this way? Well, then I realized after kind of digging deeper, it's because housing and urban development requires us to ask it this way. And if we don't ask it this way and we don't put this information into the computer and can't spit out this report, we can't sustain our funding. So kind of what the reasoning is behind why we do this stuff. So
got it. So question number 9, what type of analytic data is available for you in your role?
Well, so right now I feel like this is, again, something where I want to be able to improve upon. I can do some raw data exports out of Service Point. I can manipulate it using Excel, but I don't really have any other solution or software solution to analyze that data or actually kind of look at some different outcomes. I'm still kind of, under the constraint of whatever reports we get canned, but hopefully in the future that will change. I know that, so in a previous role when I worked in the child welfare system, we had a data analytics software called Safe Measures, and so it took that raw data and it was coded so it would spit out some really some interesting information as far as what are the outcomes for these clients. So I'd like to get to the point where maybe we look at a different software solution. I know there's things like efforts to outcomes where you can do more of that manipulation of data. So right now, we do have also a regional data dashboard where they take that Service Point data and they put it into a format where you can filter it by program types, but it's still somewhat generic, so it's not really in depth to or even specific to like our programs that we're operating. So
got it. Thank you. Question number 10. What analytic data, if any, is provided for your utilization that is not helpful?
Well, kind of going back to the dashboard that I was talking about, that is more of county-wide data. So in North County, we have, it's a different beast, I guess you could say, than like in San Diego downtown. So when we're looking at information or that's reported on this dashboard, some of it's not necessarily helpful if it's not filtered down to a level where we can see, our cities that we're serving or our agency programs. So I think they're working on that though. But again, the other thing is still it feels like more surface level things, more like counting and where are people coming from or how many people have been served in certain programs, but not necessarily some of the outcomes that would be maybe helpful to see.
Right. Okay. And last question for you. What type of analytic data is currently not available to you that would be most helpful?
I feel like something we have a really big gap in is being able to see longitudinal data. So when a person first enters, the homeless system, essentially, what happens to that person in their journey, and maybe 6 months down the road after they leave one of our programs, where are they? Are they still stably housed? Did they re-enter? Did they go back to the streets? I think that's something that having a better understanding of how clients are exiting and then either sustaining, that would enable us to make some better decisions as far as the programs that we create or even the funding we go after. So I mentioned rapid rehousing. That's kind of a new trend that has started, and there have been a lot of rapid rehousing programs starting, but it's still so new. I feel like, how helpful is this? Even if a client exits to their own rental housing, how do we know that in 6 months they're not back in the same situation they were? And so unfortunately, being able to have even the staff resources to even continue to check up on that client or do follow-ups, I mean, that's something that if we can get there and if we can analyze some of that data, that would be extremely helpful, I think, in the type of funding that we're going after and the types of programs that we're structuring. I think that would be really helpful, and I feel like that's a gap that we have.
So currently in Service Point, is there a spot for the Grant Per Diem, the program that I run, to be able to add in where they're at now? Because I know we do 30, 60, and 90-day updates.
Yeah, so there are those kind of interim updates. So if that data is known, we can put it in.
Got it.
I just don't know, how well that data is pulled back out or how, how we can better look at that. So, and also, how consistent it is, how many people are actually getting follow-up, putting it into the system to actually give us a sample that's big, big
because I know that a lot of the population I serve, the homeless veterans, is sometimes their phone number is changed the day they move out of the apartment. I would hate for it to be knocked when they're stably housed, but their number is changed and they haven't followed that up with us.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another thing that we face too, is with the population we're working with, sometimes they do come through our doors and maybe they don't have money to pay for their cell phone bill, so then they get a new number or we can't locate them again, so then it's like we don't know until they come to us again for assistance, how they're doing.
When they might be in crisis mode by the time they come back here for assistance.
Exactly.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Welcome.
You do a great job here at Interfaith.
Thank you.
You have not only been able to help me in the program that I run, but you were able to sit down with me today and answer all this list of questions with all the other work that you do. So I really appreciate you and your time.
No problem. I'm glad I could help.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.